Hello viewers and welcome to another chapter of reading. Before I begin reading, I would like to address that it is my Aunt Corinna's birthday. She makes the most wonderful sugar donuts. And I have her figuratively on the horn through this audio cameo. So again, Aunt Corinna, happy birthday.
Thank you very much, my dear.
You're welcome. Now, on to the chapter. If you would like to listen, you're welcome to listen along too.
Sure.
Alright, on to the chapter. Chapter 34, The Department of Mysteries. Harry wound his hand tightly into the mane of the nearest thestral. He placed a foot on a stump nearby and scrambled clumsily onto the horse's silken back. It did not object. That makes me think of objection! Yeah, I give some commentary. But twisted its head around, fangs bared, and attempted to continue its eager licking of his robes. He found there was a way of lodging his knees behind the wing joints that made him feel more secure, and looked around at the others. Neville had heaved himself over the back of the next thestral, and was now attempting to swing one short leg over the creature's back. Luna was already in place, sitting side saddle and adjusting her robes as though she did this every day. Now I wonder, Luna, do you really do this every day? Ron, Ginny, and Hermione, however, were all standing motionless on the spot, open-mouthed and staring. What? He said. How are we supposed to get on? Said Ron faintly, when we can't see the things. Oh, it's easy, said Luna, sliding obligingly from her thestral and marching over to him, Hermione, and Ginny. Come here. She pulled them over to the other thestrals standing around one by one and managed to help them on the backs of their mounts. All three looked extremely nervous as she wound their hands into the horses' manes and told them to grip tightly before getting back onto her own steed. This is mad, said Ron faintly, moving his free hand gingerly up and down his horse's neck. Mad! If I could just see it! You better hope it stays invisible, said Harry darkly. We all ready, then? They all nodded, and he saw 5 pairs of knees tightened beneath their robes. Okay. He looked down at the back of his thestral's I guess either one works. I was going to say gloomy, but it says glossy. Glossy black head and swallowed. Ministry of Magic, Visitor's Entrance, London, then, he said uncertainly. If you know where to go. For a moment his thestral did nothing at all. Then, with a sweeping movement that nearly unseated him, the wings on either side extended. The horse crouched slowly and then rocketed upwards so fast and so steeply that Harry had to clench his arms and legs tightly around the bone to avoid sliding backward over its bony rump. He closed his eyes and put his face down into the horse's silky mane as they burst through the topmost branches of the trees and soared out into a blood-red sunset. Ooh, that is just a beautiful sense of imagery there, J.K. Rowling.
Yep, sounds beautiful.
Yeah, I give compliments to her if I see fit. Harry did not think he had ever moved so fast. The thestral streaked over the castle, its wide wings hardly beating. The cooling air was slapping Harry's face. Okay, I'll swap my own face. Okay, let's not do that anymore. I tried to bring it to life, so... His eyes screwed up against the rushing wind. He looked around and saw his 5 fellows soaring along behind him. Each of them bent as low as possible into the neck of their thestral to protect themselves from its slipstream. They were over the Hogwarts grounds. They had passed Hogsmeade. Harry could see mountains and gullies below them. That would be a breathtaking sight, honestly. In the falling darkness, well, it's light out, but I'm recording this chapter earlier because it's such a long one.
Yeah.
Harry saw a small collection of lights as they passed over more villages. Then a winding road on which a single car was vetoing its way home through the hills. In that case, is it one of those beetle cars? I don't know what they're called. All generations probably know what I'm talking about. But the closest thing that can come to mind is like the Radbug from Mighty Morphin Power Rangers, something like that.
Well, what's that now?
Anyway, this is bizarre. Harry heard Ron yell from somewhere behind him, and he imagined how it must feel to be speeding alone at this height with no visible means of support. Yeah, it's a little alarming, but also it sounds fun, so I'm on the fence here. Twilight fell. The sky turned into a light, dusky purple, littered with tiny silver stars. Another reason I love the night. So peaceful and calm. And soon it was the only lights of Muggles Town that gave them any clue of how far from the ground they were, or how very fast they were traveling. You know, now I do wonder, what is the miles per hour on a Thestral? Or, I guess in this case, how many kilometers per hour? That sounds right. That sounds right.
Yeah, 50 kilometers. Because there they use kilometers.
Well, either way, how much do they go per hour?
I have no clue.
Making me wonder. Anyway, Harry's arms wrapped tightly around his horse's neck as he willed it to go even faster. How much time had elapsed since he had seen Sirius lying on the Department of Mysteries floor? How much longer would he be able to resist Voldemort? All Harry knew for sure was that Sirius had neither done as Voldemort wanted, not died, for he was convinced that either outcome would cause him to feel Voldemort's jubilation or fury course through his own body, making his scar sear as painfully as it had on the night Mr. Weasley was attacked. Well, I don't want to say he's right, but at the same time, I'm going to say foreshadowing of sorts. I'm trying to make it spoiler-free. As best I can. Anyhow. On they flew through the gathering darkness. Harry's face felt stiff and cold, his legs numb from gripping the Thestral sides so tightly, but he did not dare shift positions, lest he slip. He was deaf from the thundering in his ears, and his mouth was dry and frozen from the rush of cold night air. He had lost all sense of how far they had come. All his faith was in the beast below him, still streaking purposely through the night, barely flapping its wings as it sped ever onward. If they were too late... He's still alive. He's still fighting. I can feel it. If Voldemort decided Sirius was not going to crack, I'd know. Harry's stomach gave a jolt. The Thestral's head was suddenly pointing toward the ground, and he actually slid forward a few inches along its neck. They were descending at last. He heard one of the girls shriek behind him and twisted around dangerously, but could see no sign of a falling body. Thank goodness. Presumably they had received a shock from the change of position, just as he had. And now bright orange lights. Ooh. How bright are we talking about the orange? Were growing larger and rounder on all sides. They could see the tops of buildings, streams of headlights like luminous insect eyes, squares of pale yellow. That's actually a pretty color. There were windows. Quite suddenly, it seemed, they were hurtling toward the pavement. Harry gripped the Thestral with every last ounce of his strength, braced for a sudden impact. But the horse touched the dark ground as lightly as a shadow, and Harry slid from his back, looking around the street where the overflowing dumpster still stood a short way from the vandalized telephone box. Both drained of color in the flat orange glare in the streetlights. Ron landed a short way away and toppled immediately off his Thestral onto the pavement. Never again, he said, struggling to his feet. He made as though to stride away from his Thestral, but unable to see it, collided with the tiny quarters and almost fell again. Oh, Ron, we love you anyway. Never, ever again. That was the worst. Hermione and Ginny touched down on either side of him. Both slid off of their mounts a little more gracefully than Ron, though with similar expressions of relief at being back on firm ground. Neville jumped down, shaking, but Luna dismounted smoothly. Again, do you do this often, Luna? Where do we go from here, then? She asked Harry in a politely interested voice, as though this was all a rather interesting day trip. Well, you could call it that, or you could call it a night trip. Get it? Because it's night. Okay, you get it. You get it.
I get it.
Over here, he said. He gave his thestral a quick, grateful pat. Then he led the way quickly to the battered telephone box and opened the door. Come on, he urged the others as they hesitated. Ron and Ginny marched in obediently. Hermione, Neville, and Luna squashed themselves in after them. Harry took one glance back at the thestrals, now foraging for scraps of rotten food inside the dumpster, then forced himself into the box after Luna. That would make me a little claustrophobic. Who's ever nearest to the receiver, dial 2442. Oh, I forgot a number. Sorry. I was wondering why it didn't sound right. Okay, rereading. Who's ever nearest to the receiver, dial 62442. He said. Ron did it. His arm bent bizarrely to reach the dial. As it whirred back into the place, the cool female voice sounded inside the box. Welcome to the Ministry of Magic. Please state your name and business. Harry Potter, Ron Weasley, Hermione Granger, Luna said very quickly. Ginny Weasley, Neville, Longbottom, Luna Lovegood, we're here to save someone, unless your ministry can do it first. Thank you, said the cool female voice. Visitors, please take the badges and attach them to the front of your robes. Half a dozen badges slid out of the metal shoe where returned coins usually appeared. Hermione scooped them up and handed them mutely over Ginny's head to Harry. He glanced at the topmost one. Harry Potter, Rescue Mission. Well, that's a good way to describe this. Visitor to the Ministry. You are required to submit a certain present for your wand for registration at the security desk, which is located at the far end of the atrium. Fine, said Harry wildly. His car gave another throb. Now can we move? The floor of the telephone box shuddered, and the pavement rose up past the glass windows of the telephone box. The scavenging thestrals were sliding out of sight. Blackness closed over their heads, and with a dull, grinding noise, they sank down into the depths of the Ministry of Magic. A chink of soft golden light hit their feet, and widening, rose up their bodies. Harry bent his knees and held his wand as ready as he could in such cramped conditions, peering through the glass to see whether anybody was waiting for them in the atrium, but it seemed to be completely empty. The light was dimmer than it had been by the day. There were no fires burning under the mantelpieces set into the halls. But he saw as the lift slid smoothly to a halt that golden symbols continued to twist sinuously into the dark blue ceiling. The Ministry of Magic wishes you a pleasant evening, said the moment's voice. The door of the telephone box burst open. Harry toppled out of it, followed by Neville and Luna. The only sound in the atrium was the steady rush of water from the golden fountain, where jets from the wands of the witch and wizard point to the point of the centaur's arrow, the tip of the goblin's hat, and the house elf's ears continued to gush into the surrounding pool. Come on, said Harry quietly, and the six of them sprinted off down the hall. Harry in the lead, past the fountain, toward the desk where the security man who had weighed Harry's wand had sat, and which was now deserted. Harry felt sure that there ought to be a security person there. Sure that their absence was an ominous sign. Yeah, I'm getting that vibe too. And his feeling of foreboding increased as they passed through the golden gates of the lifts. He pressed down the nearest button and the lift clattered into sight almost immediately. The golden grills slid apart with a great echoing clanking, and they dashed inside. Harry stabbed the number 9 button. Please be nice to the lift, Harry. The grills closed with a bang, and the lift began to descend, jangling and rattling. Harry had not realized how noisy the lifts were on the day he had come with Mr. Weasley. He was sure that the din would raise every security person within the building. Yet when the lift halted, the cool voice said, "Department of Mysteries," and the grills slid open again. They stepped out into the corridor where nothing was moving but the nearest torches, flickering in the rush of air from the lift. Harry turned toward the plain black door. After months and months of dreaming about it, he was here at last. "Let's go," he whispered, and he led the way down the corridor. Luna right behind him, gazing around with her mouth slightly open. Yeah, I'd probably be like Luna in that moment. "Okay, listen," said Harry, stopping again within 6 feet of the door. Maybe a couple of people should stay here as a lookout, and how are we going to let you know something's coming?" asked Ginny, her eyebrows raised. "You could be miles away." "We're coming with you, Harry," said Neville. "Let's get on with it," said Ron firmly. Harry still did not want to take all of them with him, but it seemed he had no choice. He turned to face the door and walked forward, just as it had in his dream. It swung open and he marched forward, leading the others over the threshold. They were standing in a large circular room. Everything in here was black, including the floor and ceiling. Identical, unmarked, handleless doors. That would irk me. Everything not labeled. I would just be like, ugh, that irks me. I like some form of organization, people. Anyway, handleless black doors were set at intervals all around the black walls, interdispersed with branches of candles whose flames burned blue. Did Azula light those candles? Fans of Avatar: The Last Airbender know who Azula is. If you don't know who she is, go watch the series on Netflix. Anyway, their cool shimmering light reflecting in the shiny marble floor so that it looked as though there was dark water underfoot. "Someone shut the door," Harry muttered. He regretted giving the sword at the moment Neville obeyed it. Without the long chink of light from the torchlit corridor behind them, the place had become so dark that for a moment the only things they could see were the bunches of shivering blue flames on the walls and their ghostly reflections in the floor below. In his dream, Harry always walked purposefully across this room to the door immediately opposite the entrance and walked on. But there were around a dozen doors here. Just as he was gazing ahead at the doors opposite him, trying to decide which was the right one, there was a great rumbling noise. Okay. I don't know if you would call that rumbling, but it works for me. And the candles began to move sideways. Okay, I'm moving sideways. I know you can't see it, Aunt Corinna. That's why I said I'm moving sideways. Anyway, the circular wall was rotating. Okay, I'm rotating now. Like I said, I bring the story to life, so. Hermione grabbed Harry's arm as though it frightened the floor might move too, but it didn't. For a few seconds, the blue flames around them were to resemble neon lines. Oof. As the wall sped around, and then quite suddenly as it had started, the rumbling stopped and everything became stationary once again. Harry's eyes had blue streaks burned into them. It was all he could see. Ooh, that would... okay. "What was that about?" whispered Ron fearfully. "I think it was to stop us knowing from which door we came in from," said Ginny in a hushed voice. Harry realized at once that she was right. He could no sooner have picked the exit from the other doors than located as an ant upon the jet black floor. Meanwhile, the door through which they needed to proceed could be any of the dozen surrounding them. "How are we going to get back out?" said Neville uncomfortably. "But that doesn't matter now," said Harry forcefully, blinking to try and erase the blue lines from his vision, and clutching his wand tighter than ever. "We won't need to get out until we found Sirius." "Don't go calling for him, though," said Hermione urgently. But Harry never needed her advice less. His instinct was to keep as quiet as possible for the time being. "Where do we go then, Harry?" Ron asked. "I don't—" Harry began. He swallowed. "In the dreams I went through the door at the end of the corridor from the lifts into a dark room. That's this one. And then I went through another door into a room that kind of glitters. We should try a few doors," he said hastily. "I'll know the right way when I see it. Come on." He marched straight out the door now, facing him. The others, following close behind him, set his left hand against its cool, shining surface, raised his wand, ready to strike the moment it opened, and pushed. It swung open easily. After the darkness of the first room, the lamps hanging low on golden chains from this ceiling gave the impression that this long rectangular room was much brighter, though there was no glittering, shimmering lights such as Harry seen in his dreams. The place was quite empty except for a few desks, and in the very middle of the room an enormous glass tank of deep green water, big enough for all of them to swim in, which contained a number of pearly white objects that were drifting around hazily in the liquid. "What are those things?" whispered Ron. "Don't know," said Harry. "Are they fish?" breathed Ginny. "Aquarius maggots," said Luna excitedly. "That's at the Ministry for breeding." "No," said Hermione. She sounded odd. She moved forward to look through the side of the tank. "They're brains." "Brains?" "Yes. I wonder what they're doing with them." Harry joined her at the tank. Sure enough, there could be no mistake now that he saw them at close quarters. Glimmering eerily, they drifted in and out of sight in the depths of green water, looking something like slimy cauliflowers. Ugh. I love my cauliflower, and to have it slimy, no thank you. "Let's get out of here," said Harry. "This isn't right. We need to try another door." "There are doors here, too," said Ron, pointing around the walls. Harry's heart sank. How big was this place? I guess that's why they call it the Department of Mysteries. No one knows how big it is. "In my dream, I went through that dark room into the second one," he said. "I think we should go back and try from there." So they hurried back into the dark circular room. The ghostly shapes of the brains were now swimming before Harry's eyes instead of the blue candle flames. "Wait!" said Hermione sharply as Luna made to close the door of the brain room behind them. "Flagorite!" She drew with her wand in midair, and a fiery X appeared on the door. No sooner had the door clicked shut behind them than there was great rumbling, and once again the wall began to revolve very fast. But now there was a great red gold blur in amongst the faint blue, and when they all became still again, the fiery cross still burned, showing the door they had already tried. "Great thinking," said Harry. "Okay, let's try this one." Well, she wouldn't be Hermione if she didn't think of a good idea. Again he strode directly at the door, facing him, and pushed it open, his wand still raised, the other at his heels. This room was larger than the last, dimly lit and rectangular, and the center of it was sunken, forming a great stone pit some 20 feet below them. Oof, I'd hate to fall in there. They were standing on the topmost tier of what seemed to be stone benches running around the room and descending in steep steps like an amphitheater, were the courtroom in which Harry had been tried by the Wizengamot. Instead of a chain chair, however, that was not so easy to say, there was a raised stone dais in the center of the lower floor, and upon this dais stood a stone archway that looked so ancient, cracked, and crumbling that Harry was amazed the thing was still standing. I mean, I would too. I'd be too. Unsupported by any surrounding wall, the archway was hung with tattered black curtain or veil, which, despite the complete stillness of the cold surrounding air, was fluttering very slightly as though it had just been touched. "Who's that?" said Harry, jumping down on to the bench below. There was no answering voice, but the veil continued to flutter and sway. "Careful!" whispered Hermione. Harry scrambled down the benches one by one until he reached the stone bottom of the second pit. His footsteps echoed loudly as he walked swiftly toward the dais. The pointed archway looked much taller from where he stood now than when he had been looking down on it from above. Still, the veil swayed gently, as though somebody had just passed through it. "Sirius?" Harry spoke again, but much more quietly now that he was nearer. He had the strangest feeling that there was someone standing right behind the veil on the other side of the archway. Gripping his wand very tightly, he edged around the dais, but there was nobody there. All that could be seen was the other side of the tattered black veil. "Let's go!" called Hermione from halfway up the stone steps. "This isn't right, Harry. Come on, let's go!" She sounded scared, much more scared than she had in the room where the brains swam. Yet Harry thought the archway had a kind of beauty about it, old as it was. Well, I'm not surprised. Sometimes, as the phrase goes, oldies are goodies. Anyhow, the gently rippling veil intrigued him. He felt a very strong inclination to climb up on the dais and walk through it. "Harry, let's go, okay?" said Hermione more forcefully. "Okay," he said, but he did not move. He had just heard something. There were faint whispering, murmuring voices coming from the other side of the veil. "What are you saying?" he said very loudly so that the words echoed all around the surrounding stone benches. "Nobody's talking, Harry," said Hermione, now moving over to him. "Someone's whispering behind that," he said, moving out of her reach and continuing to frown at the veil. "Is that you, Ron?" "I'm here, mate," said Ron, appearing around the side of the archway. "Can't anyone else hear it?" Harry demanded, for the whispering and murmuring was becoming louder. Without really meaning to put it there, he found that his foot was on the dais. "I can hear them too," breathed Luna, joining them around the side of the archway and gazing at the swaying veil. "There are people in there." "What do you mean in there?" demanded Hermione, jumping down from the bottom step and sounding much angrier than the occasion warranted. "There isn't any in there. It's just an archway. There's no room for anybody to be there. Harry, stop it! Come away!" She grabbed his arm and pulled, but he resisted. "Harry, we are supposed to be here for Sirius!" she said in a high-pitched, strained voice. "Sirius," Harry repeated, still gazing, mesmerized, as he continued at the continually swaying veil. "Yeah." And then something slid back into place in his brain. Sirius, captured, bound, and tortured. And he was staring at this archway. He took several paces back from the dais and wrenched his eyes from the veil. "Let's go," he said, That's what I've been trying to... Well, come on then, said Hermione, and she led the way back around the dice. On the other side, Ginny and Neville were staring completely entranced at the veil too. Without speaking, Hermione took hold of Ginny's arm, Ron Neville's, and they marched them firmly back to the lowest stone bench and clambered all the way back up to the door. What do you reckon that arch was? Harry asked Hermione as they regained the dark circular room. I don't know, but whatever it was dangerous, she said firmly, again inscribing a fiery cross upon the door. Once more the wall spun and became still again. Harry approached the door at random and pushed. It did not move. What's wrong? Said Hermione. It's locked, said Harry, throwing his weight at the door, but it did not budge. This is it then, isn't it? Said Ron excitedly, joining Harry in the attempt to force the door open. Bound to be. Get out of the way, said Hermione sharply. She pointed her wand at the place where a lock would have been on an ordinary door and said, Alohomora! Nothing happened. Sirius's knife, said Harry, and he pulled it out from inside his robes and slid it into the crack between the door and the wall. The others all watched eagerly as he ran it from top to bottom, withdrew it, and then flung his shoulder again at the door. It remained as firmly shut as ever. What was more, when Harry looked down at the knife, he saw that the blade had melted. Right, we're leaving that room, said Hermione decisively. Too many names over the chapters. Too many names.
Yep.
You can't blame me for mixing them up once in a while. But yes, I meant Hermione, not Ron. I apologize. Really. But what if it's the one? Said Ron, staring at it with a mixture of apprehension and longing. It can't be. Harry could get through the other doors in his dream, said Hermione, marking the door with another fiery cross as Harry replaced the now useless handle of Sirius's knife in his pocket. You know what could be in there? Said Luna eagerly as the wall started to spin yet again. Something blubbering, no doubt, said Hermione under her breath, and Neville gave a nervous little laugh. The wall slid back into a halt, and Harry, with a feeling of increasing desperation, pushed the next door open. This is it! He knew it at once by the beautiful dancing diamond sparkling light. As Harry's eyes became more accustomed to the brilliant glare, he saw clocks gleaming from every surface, large and small, grandfather and carriage, hanging in spaces in between the bookcases, or standing on the desk ranging the length of the room, so that a busy relentless ticking filled the place like thousands of minuscule marching footsteps. That makes me think of the one Sailor Moon introduction where they had the clocks. That's what this reminds me of. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, go watch Sailor Moon. It's a wonderful anime. It's on Hulu.
Then I think that's where we will do.
But yeah, what I'm talking about is is an introduction for Sailor Moon R, which is basically their second season. So again, if you have not watched Sailor Moon before, go watch it on Hulu.
I'm gonna have to do that. You have a very good voice for reading.
Thank you.
For reading out loud, you do very well at doing exploitations and that in the right spots.
Thank you. Anyhow, the source of the dancing diamond bright light was a towering crystal bell jar that stood far at the end of the room. That just continues my train of thought with Sailor Moon because of the silver crystal. You'll understand when you watch Sailor Moon if you have not seen Sailor Moon whatsoever.
Do you say Sailor Moon?
Yes.
I've watched that.
Okay. This way. Harry's heart was pumping frantically now that he knew they were on the right track. Okay. That's how I illustrate heart sounds. He led the way forward down the narrow space between the lines of the desk, heading as he had done in his dream for the source of light. The crystal bell jar, quite as tall as he was, that stood on the desk, and appeared to be full of a billowing, glittering wind. "Oh, look!" said Jenny as they drew near, pointing at the very heart of the bell jar. Drifting along in the sparkling current inside was a tiny jewel bright egg. As it rose in the jar, it cracked open, and a hummingbird emerged, which was carried to the very top of the jar, but as it fell on the draft, its feathers had became bedraggled and damp again, and by the time it had been borne back into the bottom of the jar, it had enclosed once more in its egg. "Keep going," said Harry sharply, because Ginny showed signs of wanting to stop and watch the egg's progress back into a bird. "You've dawdled enough by that old hut," she said crossly, but followed past him to the bell jar and the only door behind it. "This is it," Harry said again, and his heart was now pumping so hard and fast he felt he must interfere with his speech. "Is it over here?" He glanced around at them all. They had their wands out and looked suddenly serious and anxious. He looked back at the door and pushed. It swung open. They were there. They had found the place. High as a church and full of nothing but towering shelves covered in small, dusty glass orbs. They glimmered dully in the light issuing from more candle brackets set at intervals among the shelves. Like those in the circular room before them, their flames were burning blue. This room was very cold. Harry edged forward and peered down one of the shadowy aisles between two rows of shelves. He could not hear anything, nor see the slightest sign of movement. "You said it was row 97, whispered Hermione. "Yeah," breathed Harry, looking up at the end of the closest row. Beneath the branch of blue glowing candles protruding from it glimmered the silver figure 53. "You need to go right, I think," whispered Hermione, squinting to the next row. "Yes, that's 54. "Keep your wands out," Harry said softly. They crept forward, staring behind them as they went down the long alleys of shelves, the farther ends of which were in near total darkness. Tiny yellowing labels had been stuck beneath each glass orb on the shelf. Some of them had a weird liquid glow. Others were as dull and dark within as blown light bulbs. They passed row 84, 85. Harry was listening hard for the slightest sound of movement, but Sirius might be gagged now, or else unconscious. "Or," said an unbidden voice inside his head, "he might already be dead." "I'd have felt it," he told himself, his heart now hammering against his Adam's apple. "I'd already know." 97! whispered Hermione. They stood grouped around at the end of the row, gazing down the alley beside it. There was nobody there. "He's right down at the end," said Harry, whose mouth had become slightly dry. "You can't see properly from here." And he led them forward, towering rows of glass balls between them, some of which glowed I don't know what I'm trying to say, softly as they passed. "You should be near here," whispered Harry, convinced that every step was going to bring the ragged form of Sirius into view upon the darkened floor. "And you were here, pretty close." "Harry," said Hermione tentatively, but he did not want to respond. His mouth was very dry now. Somewhere about here. They had reached the end of the row and merged into more dim candlelight. There was nobody here at all. All was echoing dusty silence. It might be, Harry whispered hoarsely, peering down the alley next door. Maybe. He hurried to look down the one beyond that. Harry! Said Hermione again. What? He snarled. I don't think Sirius is here. Nobody spoke. Harry did not want to look at any of them. He felt sick. He did not understand why Sirius was not here. He had to be here. This was where Harry, had seen him. He ran up the space at the end of the rows, staring down them. Empty aisle after empty aisle flickered past. He ran the other way, back past his staring companions. There was no sign of Sirius anywhere, nor any hint of a struggle. Harry, Ron called. What? He did not want to hear what Ron had to say. Did not want to hear Ron tell him that he had been stupid or suggest they ought to go back to Hogwarts. But the heat was rising in his face, and he felt as though he would like to sulk down here into the darkness for a long while before facing the brightness of the atrium above and the others' accusing stares. Oh, hugging Harry. And by that, I hug the book. That's how I hug the character. I hug the book. So if I say hugging Harry, that means I'm hugging the book for Harry. Does that make any sense? It makes sense to you. Have you seen this? Said Ron. What? Said Harry, but eagerly this time. It had to be a sign that Sirius had been here. A clue. He strode back to where they were all standing, a little way down row 97, but found nothing except Ron staring at one of the dusty glass spheres on the shelves. What? Harry repeated glumly. It's got your name on. Harry moved closer. Ron was pointing at one of the small glass spheres that glowed with a dull inner light, as though it was very dusty and appeared not to have been touched for many years. My name, said Harry blankly. He stepped forward. Not as tall as Ron. He had to crane his neck to read the yellowish label affixed to the shelf right beneath the dusty glass ball. In spidery written, that was written a date of some 16 years previously, and below that, SPT to APWBD. Dark Lord and parenthesis question mark. Harry Potter. Harry stared at it. What is it? Said, Ron asked, sounding unnerved. What's your name doing down here? He glanced at one of the other labels that stretched on that stretch of shelf. I'm not here, he said, sounding perplexed. None of the rest of us are here. Harry, I don't think you should touch it, said Hermione sharply as he stretched out his hand. Why not? He said. It's got something to do with me, isn't it? Well, you're not wrong. Don't, Harry, said Neville suddenly. Harry looked around at it. Neville's round face was shining slightly with sweat. He looked as though he could not take on much more suspense. It's got my name on, said Harry. And feeling slightly reckless, he closed his fingers around the dusty bill's surface. He had expected it to feel cold, but it didn't. On the contrary, it felt as though it had been lying in the sun for hours, as though the glow of light was warming it, expecting, even hoping, that something dramatic was going to happen. Oh, be careful what you wish for. Something exciting that might make their long and dangerous journey worthwhile after all. He lifted the glass ball from down its shelf and stared at it. Nothing whatsoever happened. The others moved in close around Harry, gazing at the orb as he brushed it free of the clogging dust. And then, from right behind them, a drawling voice said, "Very good, Potter. Now turn around nice and slowly and give that to me." And that is the end of this chapter. I hope you enjoyed it and enjoyed Aunt Corinna's audio cameo. So once again, happy birthday. And join me next week for chapter 35, Beyond the Veil. Until then, bye!